conduct and warned that he was a potential target for Russian blackmail. Because you realize the timing of this makes a lot of people think that he wouldn't have been fired if the story had not come out in the media.
Well, I think, first of all, let's look at the timeline. Sally Yates came here on the 26th of January. Then she informed the counsel's office that there were materials that were relevant to the situation. It wasn't until about 7 days later that they had access to those documents. After that time, they did what you should do, frankly, is an element of due process, reviewing the situation. They informed the president right away after they were informed of her giving us a heads up, and ultimately the president made the right decision. But I guess the question, or the point that I would put back on you is, somebody came over, gave us a heads up on a situation, told us there were materials. We were provided those materials 7 days later, reviewed those materials, underwent a process of reviewing the situation, and ultimately the president made a decision and it was the right one. So I think that the process worked, frankly, when you think of the time in which we had the information to make the decision that the president made.
Well, you're saying the president stands by that decision and he made the right decision, but why does he continue to defend Mike Flynn?
Well, I don't think it's not a question of defending Mike Flynn or not. Hold on.
He was a witch hunt and he should seek immunity.
Right. I think Mike Flynn is somebody who honorably served our country in uniform for over 30 years. And I think, as he's noted, Lieutenant General Flynn was asked for his resignation because he misled the vice president. But beyond that, I think he did have an honorable career. He served with distinction in uniform for over 30 years, and the president does not want to smear a good man.
What was his role at the White House in those 18 days? Was he still fulfilling his normal national security advisor duties?
Yeah, I'm not going to get back into it. I will say, as I mentioned, the time.
Do you think it's worrisome that he was still doing that when he was a potential target of Russian blackmail?
And one thing that I think is important to know is let's look at, again, how this came down. Someone who is not exactly a supporter of the president's agenda, who a couple days after this first conversation took place refused to uphold a lawful order of the president's, who's not exactly someone that was excited about President Trump taking office or his agenda. She had been, hold on, Caitlin, hold on, no, Caitlin, let me answer the question. She had come here, given a heads up, told us there were materials, and at the same time we did what we should do. Just because someone comes in and gives you a heads up about something and says, I want to share some information, it doesn't mean that you immediately jump the gun and go take an action. I think if you flip this scenario and say, what if we had just dismissed somebody because a political opponent of the president had made an utterance, you would argue that it was pretty irrational to act in that manner. We did what we were supposed to do. The president made ultimately the right decision, and I think he was proven that
How was she a political opponent of the president?
She was.
She's the acting attorney general that he
appointed by the Obama administration and a strong supporter of Clinton. So that's now, I think, number 4. So, Brian.
Thank you. Just following up, and correct me if I'm wrong. I know you will. But the day after it was announced that he was under investigation, Flynn, he met with, if I'm correct, with Pence and the Russians on a phone call. So while he's under investigation, why is he being allowed to participate as a national?
I really don't recall the schedule from that day, Brian's up. But the point is, again, I think this is, look, I answered the question a moment ago, but I think as I went through the timeline, Sally Yates came over here, gave us a heads up, provided us the opportunity, made it very clear that materials were available for the council to review. But and we followed that process. And within 11 days after that, we accepted General Flynn's resignation that the president had asked for.
But the point being, while he's under investigation,
I understand, but
what is
look, we're not going to relitigate the past on this. I think we've been very clear as to what happened and why it happened. I think the president made the right decision, and we've moved on. Yeah.
Yesterday we learned that, or Sally Yates had said that she learned of the first immigration order, the travel ban, by reading the newspaper. And I'm wondering why the acting attorney general wasn't privy to that. Was that because she was a Obama appointee, Clinton supporter? Why was the acting attorney general not notified? She had just met that same day that it was signed with Don McCain. And so he could have mentioned it as well.
I don't know why she wasn't. Again, I think if we want to relitigate the first executive order at the time, we talked about all of the proper individuals that needed to be made aware of were made aware of at the time.
Is it not unusual that the
I don't.
General?
I think I also, just to be clear, again, remember, this is someone who ultimately didn't even want to enforce it. So to prove, I mean, to suggest that somehow.
She wanted to enforce it until she knew.
I understand that, but I think ultimately we were proven right about who needed to be in the loop on that, because she ultimately chose to disregard the president's lawful order.
It was on purpose, though. Is what
No,
you're
I
saying.
didn't say that. Please don't. I did not say that. What I'm saying is that we discussed at the time of the executive order being signed back in January the process by which that was followed. The appropriate people then were in the loop on that. Sarah.
Yesterday in her testimony, Sally Yates said that she arranged for White House counsel to view the evidence against General Flynn at the DOJ, but she wasn't around to see if that happened. You said that took place 7 days after her initial meeting. Was the evidence against Flynn relayed to the president at that time, or did the president learn about the allegations against Flynn through the media 18 days later?
So following the meeting, the White House counsel immediately informed the president and senior White House personnel when she first came here. Late on Friday, the 27th, Yates and the White House counsel met again to discuss certain issues that she had left unclear at the time. And then the president, as you know, fired her on the 30th of January after she refused to enforce the president's legal executive order, contrary to the advice of career DOJ officials at the time, who had told her that this was legal. She overrode them, didn't do this. The White House didn't get access to that underlying evidence described by Ms. Yates until Thursday, February 2nd, which is a week after Ms. Yates first met with the White House counsel. And then that's when I think the full sort of review began, once they had access to that information.
Was the president informed at that time?
I know he was informed at the front end of what she had told him, and the council had informed them that they were going to then seek the information that she said was available to them. Hallie.
Two different topics for you. I want to follow up on what a couple of folks have already mentioned here. You've described in this briefing what Sally Yates did as a heads up with Don McGahn. She has testified she came to the White House twice in person to meet with Don McGahn on the 26th and the 27th to do more, she says, than simply offer to provide materials. She says she encouraged the White House to act and expressed real concern about Mike Flynn being compromised by the Russians. On the 28th, Saturday, Mike Flynn sat in on that Oval Office phone call with President Putin. Was that the right call?
Again, I think what you have is somebody who was an Obama appointee coming in and saying, "I'm giving." I get it, but at that moment, sure, you have someone who you have to wonder why they're telling you something, to the point where they had to come back a second time because what they were saying was unclear.
So let me follow up on that, because and before I get to the second topic, you said it was widely rumored that she wanted to be a part of the Clinton White House potentially. And so that makes you negate her coming to
No,
the...
I'm not. I guess my point is that somebody who clearly showed by the fact that career DOJ attorneys told her that the president's lawful order, that she should sign the president's lawful order, and then chose not to do it, was clear. I get it, but that vindicates the president's point that this was not somebody who was looking out. I think my point is that we were correct in the assumptions that we made at the time. Trey.
My second topic for you, though, is just on healthcare.
Yeah.
Is the White House asking Senate leadership to put more women on the working group?
I'm not aware of that. Trey.
White House like to see that?
I think the more voices that we can put on a panel to help get this done, the better. So to the extent I'm not going to tell Leader McConnell, or the White House is not going to tell him how to conduct a panel, but at the same time, I think that any voices that can be constructive in getting a more patient-centric healthcare system put together, would be welcome. But that's not our call to make.
So, Sean, you mentioned Director Clapper's testimony yesterday. Said no evidence of collusion. But then he was also asked if he was aware of the FBI counterintelligence investigation. He said he was not. And therefore, he left the impression before the panel he could not give a definitive answer about the question of collusion. Do you accept that as a valid representation of his knowledge and the fact that this remains an open question?
Sure. I mean, in the sense I'm not going to question, but I think the interesting thing is on all the other issues that he testifies about, everybody takes it as whole cloth, that if he says anything, he must. He was the DNI. So when you guys want him to speak for the entire 17 agencies, you sort of assume that that's what he's doing. In this case, when he's been asked similar questions before, and said, well, I can't speak to this case. Generally speaking, I've seen nothing. the presumption is therefore he's got to be saying it. In this case, he's saying, I have not and continue to do not see anything that shows an effort of collusion. As the DNI, I would ask you the same question, which is at some point, given all that he was seeing and all that he was given access to, when at some point are you guys going to accept this idea that there was no collusion?
I'm asking you if you accept what he testified.
Sure.
Equally, that they have equal weight. That yes, at the time he said, and the agency said they found no evidence, that is a representative fact that you take as valid, and it's also a representative fact that you take as valid. He was not aware of an FBI counterintelligence investigation, and therefore at this time cannot say conclusively there was no collusion. You give them equal weight, correct?
Sure.
Okay, fine. On Afghanistan, because I think it's important what the president's thinking about. You've been implying that ISIS is a part of the Afghanistan equation. And what I want to ask you about is, as the president looks in Afghanistan, as the team presents him options, are those options primarily about whatever ISIS component is in Afghanistan, or the larger, more malignant issue in Afghanistan, which has always been the Taliban?
Right. So there's, as you know, multiple missions going on to confront those multiple things. The U.S. currently has about 8,400 forces in Afghanistan doing a counterterrorism operation, which is Operation Freedom Sentinel, and then the NATO mission, which is to train, advise, and assist under Operation Resolute Support. The main objective of us being in Afghanistan, from being used as a safe haven for terrorists to attack the United States and our allies, that is the main objective. We remain very focused on the defeat of Al-Qaeda, its associates, as well as the defeat of ISIS-K, which is the ISIS affiliate there in Afghanistan. But that is simply put what the mission is going forward.
And when you suggest that it's a Washington question to ask if 15,000 can do a better job than 100,000, are you suggesting that the ideas the president is being presented with are so original and out of the box that 15,000 troops can achieve what 100,000 deployed very shortly after 9/11 could not achieve?
No, I'm just suggesting that I think fully refining the mission, what we're seeking to achieve, and that goes back to what Mara was saying. What is the exact objective? How far away are we doing it? What's the time level that we have to have? Can we grow the Afghan force? Is there I mean, there are several things that go into a strategy. And I think the idea of just saying, can we throw X number at it, is not the way that the president's looking at these options. He's trying to figure out, walk back from a goal of defeat, of eliminating this threat, and then tell me how we get there, as opposed to tell me how many troops we need and then what you're going to do with them. I think that there has been, in the past, some instances of just figuring, okay, if we add more troops, that'll help solve the problem. The president's asking to re-look at the entire strategy and then figure out what the footprint is in a variety of ways to get there. That is a different look at what the strategy is versus what it had been.
And one last thing. You suggested that when Sally Yates refused to enforce the executive order, that vindicated the assumption you had that she might not have been a purely well-motivated government servant bringing over this evidence about Michael Flynn. On the other side of that, after Don McGahn looked at the evidence on February 2nd, was in fact Sally Yates' warning vindicated?
I don't know. I don't know what Don saw, so I'm not privy to that.
You told us that led to his firing, so it had to have some legitimacy, right?
No, what led to his firing was that he had misled the vice president.
But wasn't that information about
Again,
those
I cannot get into, and I don't know, frankly, what was in those
Should
materials.
the country not assume that she was vindicated by that review of the evidence?
No, I don't think they should assume anything. I think facts should guide it, and the bottom line is the president fired him for misleading the vice president, and he was. I just said to you, Major, multiple times, and I said at the time. So to go back, at the time that it happened, and right now, we continue to say that the vice president was misled by General Flynn, and the president asked for his resignation. Full stop.
Thank you, Sean. Just a couple more questions on General Flynn. You keep saying that the White House was given a heads up by Sally Yates about what General Flynn had said to the Russians. She describes it differently, saying that she told the White House that General Flynn had been compromised by the Russians and was subject to blackmail by the Russians. Is that the position of the White House now, after seeing all the same evidence that Sally Yates saw, that General Flynn was compromised and potentially blackmailed?
I think, look, we've commented on this. We made a decision based on actions that he took. The president asked for and accepted his resignation. We're not looking to relitigate this.
Don't the American people deserve to know whether or not they're
They need to know that the president took decisive action in this country's best interest. And back to Steve's question, made an excellent choice for National Security Advisor.
By a foreign actor.
I don't know that you'll know. I mean, that's up for
To that conclusion. So
she didn't. I think that's. I don't know that that's for her to come to that conclusion without any investigatory method seems a little premature, don't you? I mean, to say that. Hold on, no. But what I'm saying is,
did the White House investigate whether or not their national security
all I'm going
advisor
to,
had
as I've
been
said
compromised
multiple
by the
times,
Russians?
we looked into the situation. The president made a decision, and it was the right decision. Jonathan.
Sean, a follow-up on that, but first I wanted to ask you about FBI Director James Comey's testimony before the Senate, which now apparently it looks like the FBI Director gave inaccurate testimony to the Senate. Is the White House concerned that he greatly exaggerated or misstated what kind of contact Huma Abedin had in terms of her emails and sending them to Anthony Weiner?
I have not asked the president or the staff about that, but I mean, I think there's the one issue is I don't think there's any question by any account that there was classified information inappropriately shared on an unclassified system to an uncleared person. I mean, that's to me, I think what continues to be the takeaway.
But is the White House concerned that the FBI Director apparently gave inaccurate testimony?
I don't at this point. I have not asked, and I'm not fully aware of the. I mean, I'm aware of the testimony that occurred and the inquiries, but I've yet to follow up on that, and I'd be glad to follow up.
Does the President still have confidence, full confidence in FBI Director James Comey?
I have no reason to believe. I haven't asked him, so I don't. I have not asked the President since the last time we spoke about this.
And the last time you spoke about it, you said he did have confidence, but you're not sure to say that again now?
Well, I don't, in light of what you're telling me, I don't want to start speaking on behalf of the President without speaking to him first.
And then one follow-up on Flynn. The President, of course, had said that Flynn should ask for immunity before agreeing to testify. Does he still believe that?
I think General Flynn should seek the advice of counsel and take their advice with respect to